Another law enforcement agency continues to be a lightning rod for criticism. Rights organizations are charging that the police department in Ferguson, Missouri is again overreacting. Ferguson is where 18-year-old Michael Brown was shot and killed by white police officer Darren Wilson. Police reacted to protests outside their headquarters this week by arresting about a dozen people. In the 2 months since Brown's shooting, Ferguson has been the scene of tense demonstrations, and they're demanding the arrest of Officer Darren Wilson, who witnesses claim shot the teenager even though Brown had raised his hands in the air. Well, the federal government ordered Ferguson officers to stop wearing bracelets that read, "I am Darren Wilson." Against department rules, the officers had also covered their name badges. A local grand jury is considering whether criminal charges should be brought against Officer Wilson. The decision is expected by mid-November. However, across the country, a South Carolina officer has been charged with assault for a shooting that's disturbingly similar. The white officer repeatedly fired on an unarmed black man. The man says he was reaching into his car to get his license. The officer claims he thought the man was going for a gun. Now, a found guilty Officer Grubert could get 20 years. And in Florida, a mostly white jury found Michael Dunn guilty of murder. He's a man who opened fire on a car full of black teenagers after complaining their music was too loud. Well, the U.S. Justice Department, under the outgoing Attorney General Eric Holder, is looking into the issue of unequal justice and law enforcement, including racial profiling as well as excessive force. Rashad Robinson is Executive Director of Color of Change, the nation's largest online civil rights organization. Welcome to the show. Now, you're seeing a movement for equal justice, I would assume, coming out of the Ferguson case.
We're certainly seeing more and more people coming to a movement for justice around the country, and people raising their voices in ways that they haven't before. But we continue to see these moments. We continue to see these moments all around the country when black people are hurt, murdered, or put in harm's way by the police, and there's no sense of accountability. There's no sense of justice.
Now, we live in a country of equal rights, freedom of speech, and the like and all that. But when you see a case that's high profile like this, and police officers wearing slogans on them or wristbands or whatever saying that I am such and such or I am Darren Wilson, someone might say it's double standard, but in a sense, I don't think that's the case here. Explain to us.
You don't think it's the case of double standard in terms of what?
In terms of double standard, in terms of the police officers not being able to wear bracelets saying one thing and the protesters saying, hey, I am Michael Brown. What I'm saying is some might say, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, I'm playing devil's advocate,
of course,
that this would be a double standard, but you would probably argue otherwise.
Well, the police work for us, the taxpayers. Their job is to be impartial. Their job is to show up each day and to not just bring about justice and not just to be fair, but the whole reason why we trust the police or want to trust the police is because we have to believe in them. We have to believe that they're there to do the right thing. When the community can't trust law enforcement, they're less likely to call them even when there are troubles. And so this breakdown between trust in the community that black and brown communities oftentimes have for law enforcement isn't just about sort of the fact that we don't trust our police officers. It also creates more crime in our community because people are less likely to trust the police and call them when they need them. And so the Justice Department stepping in this situation was incredibly important. It sends a powerful message. But police all around the country, in these moments, we see this in New York. We've seen this in LA. This sort of blue shield that happens when there's police misconduct, where police do not sort of report other police officers, where there's not there's no incentive for prosecutors.
We're going to go around the country to a few states. We're going to start with South Carolina, of course, a southern state, and they reacted pretty quickly down there, where the gentleman, of course, of color, was reaching for his wallet. I've got to ask, do you think that the videotape made the difference there?
I think the videotape absolutely made the difference. It made it a lot harder for there to be two different sides to the story. The video was so clear, so disgusting, and so compelling that it traveled. But it took a long time for that video to get out. And had that video never gotten out, I have real doubts if we would actually be seeing the situation play out the way it played out.
But yet and still, Rashad, we have a case here in New York with Eric Garner, who it seems seems clearly, if anybody's looking at that tape and not through rose-colored glasses, that one of those officers put him in a chokehold. Yet and still, you have Pat Lynch, who's the head of the PBA, looking at the same tape that everybody else is looking at and sees something totally different. Video didn't perhaps do much there.
Well, this is exactly how this system has been politicized. Police are allowed to investigate themselves. We lack the type of independent review boards with real teeth in them, and so as a result, when these situations come down, we see the police officers union step in. We see politicians that have to be tough on crime. We see prosecutors that are sort of supposed to be the folks bringing about justice, whether that's in Ferguson or whether we just recently saw that in Ohio, who are defending the police and coming out right away and standing up for the police instead of standing up for the people who are victims or being put in harm's way. When black people or brown people are put in harm's way or killed by police, we see a different set of justice, a different standard for justice.
Real quickly, we also have seen here justice being done in the Michael Dunn case in Florida here, and a mostly white jury came up with this verdict that convicted him.
A couple of things. Michael Dunn's not a police officer. And this case, hundreds of thousands of people at Color of Change and other organizations had to stand up. You have to remember, murder in the first degree was a mistrial the first time around. This is their second bite at the apple. And maybe if they had gotten a second bite at the apple in the Trayvon Martin case, we might have seen something different. But the amount of work, sweat, organizing, advocacy that had to go into this situation to ensure that this young black boy was seen as a victim, that his life had value and humanity, and that this man who shot him in cold blood actually has to go behind bars. The work that we have to do in these situations is overwhelming.
Okay, well, look, the spotlight will be, of course, on Ferguson, Missouri, as well as New York City. And we know that you will be all over this, as well as we will here at Arise Review. Rashad, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.